Okay, now you see my friend Steve, he is helping me making this video. And Steve, he is absolutely not a historian, but he has been living here in Copenhagen in Denmark for many years. And he is interested in these subjects. And maybe he will ask some questions or tell me if it's a little too complicated.
Yeah, I'm an absolute novice when it comes to Danish history. It's something I've never really looked at. But I'm here to help Jacob clarify to you what you should know that we think you should know. Do you follow that?
Discussion during the Reformation period. You know, it started in 1517 in Wittenberg, where Martin Luther, he put up 95 theses on the door of the church. And after that, he developed his theology. Sorry, there is some noise because of all the tourists here in Copenhagen. But the idea that Martin Luther had was that the whole world is divided between the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of this world. And now we are in this world. That's why we're able to record it on video. But up in the heaven, there God was, and God he don't mix into the worldly affairs. That was the idea of Luther. That was why he was very much against the Catholic faith. And Steve and I, we have made somehow the same arrangement. Yeah, I'm up in the sky, and you're down in this world.
Ground, yeah.
So you should be able to understand what Steve is saying.
Street talk.
Street talk.
Street talk. So my job is to translate from the man in the sky down to the street, out to you YouTubers, what exactly it's all about. Hopefully we'll get there.
Okay, very good.
Okay, now we've moved to another location in Copenhagen, a street called Gottesgaard, and forgive us if the military band across the road strikes up, as they're obviously doing some practicing, but there's nothing we can do about that. In the meantime, I have another question for you. Behind us is a beautiful church, known as the French Reformed Church. Jacob, could you tell me exactly what is relative to this church in your argument and the subject in general?
Yes, I need to mention that my own mother was baptized in this church. How could that be? Because this is not a Lutheran church. You know, in Denmark, after 1536, Lutheranism was a state religion, and up until 1848, it was not allowed to have any other religion than Lutheranism. But then Denmark were very good friends with the Dutch people. Why? Because the Dutch came and they helped us during one of our wars with Sweden. The Dutch, they had a big fleet, and they wanted to be able to sail through Øresund because they have customers down in Jutland and Finland and Russia.
So that was the payoff then?
That was the payoff. They wanted to be good friends with the Danes, and we wanted to be good friends with them because they had a fleet. They were strong. It was a military power. And therefore, the Dutch said, well, if it's not even allowed to have the Dutch religion, and in Holland they are Reformed, they are Calvinist, just like today they were Calvinist also in the 16th century. Then the Danish king said, okay, we build a Calvinist church and we make one exception. All other religions than Lutheranism, they are banned here in this country, except Calvinism. You are allowed to be Calvinist, but only if you practice inside the church. You're not allowed to come out here or any kind of preaching or propaganda, and that's not allowed. Then you will be punished.
Could you, in a quick summary, explain exactly what is Calvinism?
Well, Calvinism is the religion started up by the Protestant, the follower of Luther, called Jean Calvin. He was a doctor in law coming from France, And he had the idea that Luther was a fantastic man, but Luther had one single problem. That is that Luther, he didn't understand his own writings. And therefore Calvin, he said, I have to translate these writings so even Luther can understand what Luther is writing, and of course all other people. And then he said, it is not right that Luther said every man has no free will. This was a basic view of Martin Luther. But Calvin say, this is called predestination. But I believe that God has made twice predestination, and that means that even before you are born, God has decided if you're going to heaven or to hell. Only God. You can't do anything yourself, so forget everything about praying to God and praying to Virgin Mary and being a good human being. Won't help you at all. It's only if God wants you to go to hell, like you have a house. I have a house, I can decide exactly myself who can come and visit me, no matter if they are good or bad. And God has his house up in heaven, and he decides all alone, even before you're born, if you come to heaven. And because John Calvin, he had this point of view, that means when the Calvinists, they were expelled from Scotland, because that happened many years later, they started up the new world in America, came with Mayflower to colonize America. You know, America is basically a Calvinist country, because when you're a Calvinist, you are very much interested in success in this world, because you can't do anything about heaven. God has decided if you're going to hell or heaven. Yeah. Forget it all.
Life is predestined then.
Life is predestined.
So my argument, my question would be, if we have no form of argument to go to heaven or hell, what is our destiny then?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. As far as the Calvinist point of view.
Seen from a Calvinist point of view, you can't do anything about it. You will be saved if you have the Calvinist faith, if you believe in Jesus, but what does it mean to believe in Jesus? Well, even Muslims, they believe in Jesus. There's a lot about Jesus in the Quran, so it's a hard question what it means to believe in Jesus. But the Calvinists say, don't care about that. That is the word of God. You're only a human being. So what you can try to find out, it is if you're going to heaven or hell. And Calvin, he had a program that every man and woman could find out if he would go to heaven and hell, even when he was alive in this world. And the medicine was very simple, because he had the idea, if you're going to heaven, then God will start up giving you a heavenly life. God will say, well, this man is going to heaven, so he needs to have a good life here, so he can be used to all the paradise, all the wonderful women, all the gold, all the angels and everything in heaven. Therefore, we have to make this man a rich and successful man.
What about struggle? Isn't struggle sort of education? I mean, if you go through experiences, then you that educates you, and you learn a great deal by for example, hitting rock bottom.
Exactly, but seen from a Calvinist point of view, if you hit rock bottom, it's because God wants you to hit rock bottom. And when he wants you to hit rock bottom, it's because he probably has the plan that you're going to hell. Yeah. And he decided that before you were born. You can't change it. Okay. So
behind us. Jakob, you were in the middle of discussing what exactly was going on behind us.
Yeah, this is such an interesting place, because this was the end of the life in freedom for Joachim Rønnow, the last Catholic bishop in Denmark before the Reformation. When Johann Rantzau, the German general, and his German soldiers his sermon, he was paid soldiers. They came here and conquered Copenhagen. They put up a big search for the bishop, and they found him after a few hours. He was hiding under the roof up there, and they put him in this very nasty prison called Blue Tower Blåtårn in the castle of Copenhagen that we are going to see later on. But I have another story. Can I tell that?
Yes, I mean, you're the man with the knowledge. I'm the man who's just asking the occasional questions, so go ahead.
After the Reformation, the Catholic Church, they started up anti-Protestant congregation called the Jesuits. The Jesuits, they were working just like today's special soldiers. When you have wartime today, you use specialized soldiers, not in uniform. Yeah. They have a lot of skills. They can hide everywhere, and they are highly trained, and that's the way to start up warfare. And when it comes to religious warfare after the Reformation, it was somehow the same. Although, if I ask the Jesuits today, this order is still existing today, and we have had many Jesuits here in Copenhagen. They would say, Jacob, you are exaggerating. But I don't think I'm very much exaggerating, because there was a Jesuit coming from Norway. Actually, he converted to Catholic. And that means 2 years after the Reformation, the Catholic faith was illegal. Then how could he convert to Catholic faith? Well, that was because he lived up in Norway. And Norway, it's far away from Copenhagen, so it took some time before the news got out. Yeah. The news got out. Yeah. So he said, I want to be a Catholic. And then he traveled down to what is called Poland today. It had another name. I think it was called Livland at that time. But in Poland, they were all Catholics like they are today. And there he went into a seminary to become a Jesuit priest. And they said, because you're coming from Denmark, Norway was a part of Denmark, then we want to use you as a specialized soldier, a Jesuit. So he was highly trained in theology and discussion, everything about religion. And then he was sent to Sweden, what today is called Sweden. And Sweden has always been a little more Catholic than Denmark. Of course, it is a Protestant country, but not the same hardcore Protestantism as we have here in Denmark. And actually, this guy, he was called in literature, he's called Kloster Lasse. It's very hard to translate.
Monastery Lasse.
Monastery Lasse, yeah. That was his the name they gave him. But he presented himself with his normal name when he came to Sweden. And the Swedish king, he said, well, you're such a learned man, that's just what we need for a leader of one of our seminaries. And he didn't understand that this man was a highly trained Catholic. And now he was made leader of a Protestant seminary. And he got the orders down from Rome, where the leadership of the Jesuits still today is. And they said, well, you have to get close to the Swedish king and slowly convince him that the Reformation was a very bad idea.
And did it work?
It worked not fully. Still today, Sweden is a Protestant country, but there have been not more than 3 Swedish kings being Catholics. The last king they had in Sweden was they found in France. It was one of Napoleon's generals. It was in 1814. Before that, they had a Swedish queen called Dronning Christina. She even converted to Catholic faith while still being a queen of Sweden. but she didn't make it official because she knew she couldn't be Queen of Sweden and a Catholic at the same time. So she, she retired from her job and went to Rome. And still today, in the Church of St. Peter, you can see her grave. And there was a third one who became a Catholic because he was married to a Polish queen, so he found it convenient to be Catholic. So 3 Catholic kings. In Denmark we have had none. And therefore the Jesuits, they say, well, they are partly Catholic in Sweden. That's where we have to work. That's the weak point. That's why we had to put our troops there, the Jesuits. But when he had been there for some years, then some very Protestant priests, they found out who he was, and he was expelled from Sweden. And then he went to Denmark. And this was under the reign of Christian IV, from 1588 until 1648. Christian IV was the king of Denmark. And he built a lot of places. We have Rundetårn and many other, Rosenborg Castle. They were all built by Christian IV.
Yeah, he was a real innovator, wasn't he? An entrepreneur.
Yeah, very much an entrepreneur, and he was very, very Protestant in his...
And progressive.
It depends on what.
Materially wise, he rebuilt Copenhagen. Yeah.
Absolutely, and he had 24 wives, he really enjoyed the favor of being a king. Power, sex, and money, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, he was made. He was actually made for him, by the sounds of it. He was. Just a second, we'll have a pause.
Well, I can speak a little while you are thinking. Well, he was an innovator, but he had the problem that even his own daughter, one of his daughters, was called Leonora Christina, and she had, I don't know how she got it, but she got Catholic thoughts in her head. And that was not very good because under the reign of Christian IV, there was death sentence for being a Catholic.
So what happened? What was the fate?
Well, what happened? First of all, she married Danish nobility called Corfitz Ulfeldt. And Corfitz Ulfeldt, he was even more a Catholic. He was a part of the nobility, and the Catholic faith survived for some years in the nobility here in Denmark. And he married Leonora Christina, and when the Swedish, they declared war next time against Denmark, they were nearly conquering whole Denmark in 1660. Corfitz Ulfeldt, he was on the side not of the Danish but of the Swedish. So Corfitz Ulfeldt started up as mayor, some kind of mayor here in Copenhagen, employed by the Danish king. But when the Swedish attacked, he switched side. So he is called in Danish landsforræder, I think, in traitor.
Traitor, that's right. Yeah.
A traitor, that's...
Traitor of the country.
Traitor of the country, yeah. That's what it is called. And even today you can find different monuments around showing this traitor.
It's still standing.
They are still standing. He was sentenced to death, but he flew away, so they never found him. But he was married to Leonora Christina. And when they flew away from Denmark, both of them, they went to Holland, and he tried to find another job, maybe in some Catholic king down Europe. Then Leonora Christina, she went to England because she thought that there was some English, I'm not quite sure if it was nobility or queen or some high person in England. They owed her a lot of money. And she said, we really need money now because we had to flee from Denmark. And therefore, she traveled alone, not with Corfitz Ulfeldt. She traveled alone to England. And there, the English king, he said, wow, this is a high-profile person. So he sent a message to the Danish king, and the Danish king sent 2 special agents to England, and they arrested her, and she was taken back to Denmark.
Well, where are we?
Well, Steve, that was just what I was going to ask you. Where are we? We are in the middle of nowhere. Some trash cans here and an old house behind us. What is that? And a yellow wall. I can see a cafe on the other side of the street, but well, we have to finish this place.
Yeah, I'm getting thirsty.
As a matter of fact, this was a very important place during the Reformation. There was a Carmelite monk. He was very much against Protestantism, and he lived up in Elsinore, a little town in northern Jutland. He was a Carmelite monk there, but at the same time he was a professor at the university in Copenhagen, professor in theology. And every time he went to Copenhagen to teach his students, he couldn't go back to Elsinore. It was a long travel, so he stayed in here. This was a guest house especially for monks and holy people. It was owned by the Carmelite congregation. Carmelite is a Catholic congregation still existing today. And he stayed in here, Paul Helgesen. And this Paul Helgesen, he was also a priest in Denmark, and he was some kind of prosecuted during the Reformation. Actually, no one knows exactly what happened to him. Certainly he was gone, he was away. And then 300 years later, in a little church called Skiby Kirke, it's about 150 kilometers from here, there's a little town called Skiby, and there's a church still today. It was a Catholic church before the Reformation. Paul Helgesen, he was the priest there. And he had wrote his whole memoir. Today it's called Skiby Krøniken. I don't know how to translate that into English, but the tale of Skiby, that is what he called it. Yeah. And he wrote exactly what had happened during the Reformation. And this man, he was very much against Protestantism. That means he couldn't stay here. Then he should have converted to Lutheran faith. He wouldn't do that. So probably he has been killed, or maybe he just flew out in the world and...
he was never seen again.
He was never seen again. No one has ever found out what happened to him. He was a professor at the university and one of the highest level theologians here in Denmark. And the guy called the Danish Luther, this man called Hans Tausen, he was one of the students of our professor in here, and they had a lot of discussions at the university because Hans Tausen, he was a Protestant, and the guy living in here, theologian, he was a devout Catholic, so they had some clashes, and we'll see later on maybe the place where these clashes happened, because it was on such a high level that the king in Denmark arranged an official debate between Paul Helgesen, the Carmelite living in here, and Hans Tausen, that was the most devoted Protestant. It was high-level discussion, and there was no television, so they arranged it at the town hall. Yeah. Not far from here, and everyone could come in here. But actually no one won the debate, because, when you're talking about these matters, you can just go on forever and no one will ever win. Both parts think that the other is not in his clever mind. But Paul Helgesen, he was living in here, and unfortunately his house is pulled down, but the yellow part here, it continues all the way around. It is the old wall from when it was part of the monastery. So that means it is...
so that was the outer wall?
This was the outer wall. Yeah. the monastery or the study room. It was where the house is, but it was pulled down. And now it's collegium for young students. They can do that. So that is the question why we haven't reached the cafe yet. We just have to pass Paul Helgesen.
It's actually not far away.
It's not far away. Across there, I'm sure it was not existing during the time of Paul Helgesen, but today there is a cafe called St. Peter. And I know this is a very friendly cafe, so
okay,
maybe we should go there.
Definitely.
What do you think about Paul Helgesen?
Well, a fascinating character.
Yeah.
When you delve into anything, underneath is full of riches, and I think there's more to be told, because once we finish at the cafe, we'll be moving on to somewhere even more interesting and probably a little more well known.
For sure, well known. This is not very well known. Even most people from Copenhagen, they don't know anything about this.
I don't know anything about it. It's the first time I've been here. You don't notice it when you're passing in the street.
But
it's quite well hidden.
A few moments ago, we just spoke to a young student living in there, and she knew what it was. She knew the story. So I suppose when you get a room there, when you're young studying...
it's part of the parcel, as they say.
Yeah, you will be told the story.
The story, So a very interesting area. Well, now we've changed location. We are in the center of Copenhagen, the real old center of Copenhagen. This area is called Nytorv, and directly behind us was, in the past history, a lot of unpleasantries. Directly behind us is where they used to burn witches. And a little further back, some 200 meters, is where they used to hang people and decapitate them, behead them, almost as a sport. And sometimes Christian IV would just watch.
Yeah, the Danish king Christian IV, it was his most pleasant hobby to watch these witches, as he called them.
Burned at the stake.
You have to understand, these were mostly young women that haven't done anything wrong at all.
They were mostly young, independent thinkers.
They were
and they didn't follow
accused of anything if the harvest didn't go the right way, if some horse was dead in the farm, then they were accused.
So any excuse to get rid of anyone who's pretty independent.
Absolutely.
Strong and independent.
Yeah.
So there must be a lot of ghosts, I guess, hanging around here.
Yeah, if you believe in ghosts, and I do, then maybe you will feel a little cold when you're sitting here. Even here in the middle of summertime, you feel a little chilling, yes.
Well, I don't feel any chill. I mean, it is pretty warm, and it's unusual.
Okay. Yeah, ghost. You have to understand that there were killed 1,000, mostly women, after the Reformation. There was killed no one before the Reformation, only after here in Denmark. And it was because the Protestant kings, they wanted to prove that Protestantism was more according to scriptures. But of course, you know, in the Old Testament, it is very clear that if you find a witch, she has to be burned. That is a quote from Old Testament, and that is what they referred to. But of course, all these 1,000 witches, they were not burned here. They were burned all over the country and in the local cities.
And they also have this tradition.
They have the same tradition today. Of course, we don't burn living women, but often at Sankt Hans, the longest day in the year, you have a big, you burn, and you have a witch made out of wood or something on
something
the top.
Symbolic.
So it's symbolic, referring to the Middle Ages where it was when. But this is a very interesting place also when it comes to the Counter-reformation, because one of the bishops that were killed during the Reformation and following Counter-reformation was Bishop Jacques Lek. He was from Germany, so it's quite hard for me to express his name, but I think it's called Jacques Lek. And Christian the second, he said that he was the man guilty of the bloodbath in Stockholm. 82 people were killed there. And the king said, no, it's not me, it's not my fault, it's someone else. And then he took the Catholic bishop called Jacques Lek and said, you're the one guilty. And he couldn't do anything. And they just put him at the stake, and he was burned here, not where we are sitting, but behind where there's what do you call it, springvand, decorative water fountain today. So this place here is definitively haunted by a lot of ghosts. Yeah. But the last thing I'll say that's in here, it was in the old days the main town hall of the city. And there, the Protestant and the Catholic, before the Reformation, they had a lot of discussions. And Hans Tausen, you told me, someone who's the descendant of Hans Tausen. Yeah. I'm descendant of Hans Tausen.
We had a lot of children.
There are many Danes that are descendant of Hans Tausen. He was the leader of the Reformation. And Hans Tausen, he had a lot of discussions with Paul Helgesen. We visited the monastery where he lived when he was teaching at the university.
So they were living around the same time.
Yes, exactly. And Hans Tausen was a student of Henningsen, and they had discussions in there. But you have to understand that after the Reformation, it was a time of religious terror, and this religious terror, it ended when we had religious freedom. It came up in 1848, and there we had our new parliament and our new constitution, and actually Denmark was transformed into a more, I would say, humanistic country.
Who was responsible for that then? Who was the main character?
It was the king, Frederik VII. Yeah. That's why he's the king you will find all over in any Danish town, all including here in front of the parliament here in Copenhagen. You will find a monument of Frederik VII riding a horse. Yeah. Because every Danes, they say, what a nice person.
Yeah, so he was a man of the people.
He was a man of the people, exactly. And when he had power, he said, okay, you could be a Protestant, you could be Catholic, Jew, atheist, Muslim, you can be anything. As long as you follow the laws here in Denmark, you're welcome. Yeah. And I think that's a good idea.
I think that principle has stayed for quite a long time,
Quite a lot of time, and most European countries has the same idea.
It's tolerance.
Yeah. We can't just have a country with only one religion, because we will never agree when it comes to religion, because who can prove if your God is better than mine?
We need some polemics and some argument in it.
In the old days they said, well, we must have a war, because if your God is better than mine, then you will win the war. Yeah. So we'll know after the war, but
So that's how they solved it in those days.
That's how they solved it. But if we should have a war today with the weapons the superpowers have, I'm sure the winning God, he'll be dead. Yes. He will have no followers
at all. So that's
the
equation then.
So yeah. But let's move on to the last place in this little tour around in Copenhagen.
Yeah. And then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, exactly.
Right.